Hey, Rob from DJI here, and today I'm reviewing the SooCoo C30. This camera has a Sony IMX078 sensor and a Novatech processor, a combination that generally produces solid video at a budget price. Needless to say, I had some high expectations for this camera, and for the most part, it met those expectations. Despite its flaws, this is a camera I can recommend to those who are looking for a cheap action cam with very good video. I'm going to keep the rest of this introduction short since all of these action cameras are designed more or less the same. The buttons on this camera feel very good, the screen looks sharp, but its mounts are a little bit on the cheap side. The only other thing that really stands out, and in not such a good way, is the user interface. The menus are not very well laid out, as all the settings are mashed into a single list and not broken into groups. This is something that could be fixed with a future firmware update, but as it stands, it's pretty messy. Also, the instruction manual is quite poorly translated, so I'll post a quick setup video for you all later. In terms of video quality, this camera is great, especially considering the cost. The video is exceptionally smooth in 1080p 60 and 2K 30, with a good amount of detail and accurate color. It is sharp throughout the entire frame as well. There's no selection for bitrate, but the video the camera outputs is visually appealing and pleasant, equal to or better than any other action cam I've tested to date. I didn't touch 4K for long, and I suggest it be avoided. The camera's processor is not capable of rendering 4K, so it's faked, and unfortunately it doesn't look very smooth. The maximum usable resolution of this camera is 2K. This is the same with any other camera in the sub $200 price range though, so I didn't ding any points for it. Night video with this camera is alright, but nothing to rave about. Once it starts to get dark out, this camera blurs frames together. It becomes unusable at the same time as I need bike lights, so I'm not dinging any points for that either. Just note that if you plan on riding in the dark, you'll probably want to invest in something a little higher end. This camera features gyro stabilization, and while I found that it did work pretty well, it wasn't as effective as competitors. Currently the results are far better than cameras without stabilization, but it doesn't react fast enough to hit harder bumps when mounted to my handlebars. You can see that in this comparison video. In terms of still images, this camera is only capable of shooting images up to 12 megapixels. The so-called 20 megapixel images are upsized and more for hype than anything else. The images themselves look okay. They won't win any awards, and there's a decent amount of smudging in details, but for the most part they do get the job done. For most users it will be acceptable, but if you want better still images you'll need to move up to the SJCam M20 or the GIT2 Pro.
This is a voice test. If you can hear me, that means it was successful. I'm currently standing about 2 feet away from the camera. I never know what to say on these things, so hopefully this is good enough for you.
There is one other little quirk that annoys me about this camera, and that is it doesn't beep to confirm recording start or stopped. It has a voice that says recording and stopped recording, but it's nearly impossible to hear that when the waterproof case is on. Combine that with the poorly laid menus, and it means this camera isn't as user-friendly as competitors, but again, these are all things that can be fixed in future firmware updates, and personally, it doesn't make enough of a difference to me that I want to spend $40 more. Taking a quick look at competing cameras, compared to the GIT2, I found that the video straight from the C30 looked better overall. Both cameras render an excellent amount of detail, but the C30 has better white balance, and the video overall looks much smoother. My GIT2 suffers from micro stuttering, and I find that it's not exactly usable in anything other than 1080p 60. The GIT2 does come out on top in a few places though. It has a significantly better image stabilizer, and thanks to a low contrast mode, it's a little bit easier to touch up in post. My suggestion is that the C30 will suit most people a little bit better, because out-of-the-box video is more appealing. However, those who want to stretch their image a bit further, in terms of color and contrast, will prefer the GIT2. Also, the GIT2 still images have a little more detail. Compared to the SJ5000X Elite, video is essentially identical. I didn't have an SJ5000X on hand to test it against directly, but from comparison footage I shot with that cam a few months back, I'd say there's no reason to buy the SJ5000X when you can get this camera for $40 cheaper. In terms of color, contrast, and even stabilizer, they're basically the same camera. I prefer the user interface of the SJ5000X, but I don't prefer it $40 freedom dollars more. My advice is if you're waffling between this cam and the SJ5000X, buy this one instead. Spend the extra money on some additional batteries, a charger, or maybe even some higher quality mounts. Thanks for watching. Visit drekkytech.com for more.